The bright morning sun streamed through the large windows of Atlanta International Airport as 10-year-old Michael and his mother Tanya made their way to Gate B-23. Michael clutched his small blue backpack tightly, his eyes wide with excitement. This was only his third time flying, and he couldn't wait to see his grandmother in Chicago. "Mom, do you think Grandma made her special cookies?" Michael asked, practically skipping beside Tanya, who smiled down at her son. "I'm sure she did, honey. She knows they're your favorite," Tanya replied, checking their boarding passes one more time. Michael was an honor roll student, always polite and well-behaved, which made Tanya incredibly proud, especially as a single mother working 2 jobs to provide for him. When their boarding group was called, they lined up with the other passengers. Michael couldn't help but bounce slightly on his toes, earning a warm smile from an elderly couple standing behind them. The flight wasn't full, which was a relief to Tanya, who had saved for months to afford these tickets. As they handed their boarding passes to the gate agent, Michael noticed a flight attendant watching them from the entrance of the jet bridge. Unlike the other crew members who were smiling and greeting passengers, this woman had a tight expression on her face, her lips pressed into a thin line. Her name tag read Patricia. "Stay close to me," Tanya said as they made their way down the jet bridge. Around them, other families chatted excitedly about their trips. A group of kids a few years older than Michael were talking loudly about a video game, their voices echoing in the narrow space. When they stepped onto the plane, Patricia's eyes followed them intently. Michael gave her his best smile, the one his teacher said could brighten a rainy day, but Patricia didn't smile back. Instead, her eyes narrowed slightly. "Good morning," Tanya said politely as they passed. Patricia nodded curtly without responding, then immediately turned to welcome the White family behind them with a warm, "Welcome aboard. Are you folks excited for your trip?" Michael didn't notice the difference in treatment as he was too busy looking for their row. "Mom, we're in 14A and B, window seat," he whispered excitedly, trying to keep his voice down like his mother had taught him to do in public spaces. "Excuse me," Patricia's sharp voice cut through the air. "Young man, you need to keep it down. People are trying to board." Tanya looked up, surprised. "He was just whispering to me about our seats." Around them, the kids from the jet bridge were much louder, laughing and talking about their game as they settled several rows ahead. Patricia didn't seem to notice them at all. "Well, make sure he stays quiet during the flight," Patricia said firmly. "We can't have disruptive passengers." Tanya felt a familiar knot form in her stomach, the one that appeared whenever her son was treated differently for no reason other than the color of his skin. But she kept her composure, gently guiding Michael to their row. "What did I do wrong, Mom?" Michael whispered, his earlier excitement dimming. "Nothing, baby. Nothing at all," Tanya assured him, helping him get settled by the window. She noticed a middle-aged white businessman across the aisle watching the interaction with a frown. As other passengers continued boarding, Michael took out his tablet, planning to play his math game during the flight. Tanya had downloaded educational games to keep him occupied during the 2-hour journey. The plane was filling up, the overhead compartments slamming closed as people stored their luggage. Patricia walked by their row several times, each time glancing at Michael with an expression that made Tanya increasingly uncomfortable. Meanwhile, the kids a few rows ahead were now playing a game where they were tossing a small toy back and forth across the aisle, and Patricia walked right past them without comment. "Mom, is something wrong with the flight attendant?" Michael asked quietly, picking up on the tension despite his young age. "No, honey. Just focus on your game, okay? We'll be taking off soon, and then you can see the clouds," Tanya replied, squeezing his hand reassuringly while silently praying the flight would go smoothly. Little did they know that this was just the beginning of an incident that would soon capture the attention of the entire nation. The seatbelt sign dinged as the captain announced they were preparing for takeoff. Michael looked out the window, his eyes following the ground crew as they finished their work. Tanya helped him buckle his seatbelt, making sure it was secure but not too tight. "Remember to chew gum during takeoff," Tanya said, handing Michael a piece of mint gum. "It helps with the ear popping." Michael nodded and carefully unwrapped the gum. His tablet was safely stowed in the seat pocket in front of him, as the flight attendants had instructed during their safety demonstration. Patricia was at the front of the cabin, seemingly watching their row even as she went through the motions of the safety briefing. The plane began to taxi, and Michael pressed his face against the window. "Mom, look at how small the cars look already," he whispered, careful to keep his voice down after that earlier warning. Just as the plane turned onto the runway, Michael's tablet slipped from the seat pocket and clattered onto the floor. The sound wasn't particularly loud, certainly not louder than the plane's engines or the baby crying 3 rows back, but Patricia's head snapped in their direction immediately. Without finishing her conversation with another passenger, she marched down the aisle straight to their row. "What's going on here?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough that several nearby passengers looked up. "I'm sorry," Michael said, his voice small. "My tablet fell. I didn't mean to." "We can't have disruptions during critical flight phases," Patricia cut him off, speaking loudly enough that people several rows away turned to look. "This is a safety issue." Tanya reached down to pick up the tablet. "It just slipped out. We've got it now, no problem." Patricia folded her arms across her chest. "Your son is creating a disturbance. Other passengers are uncomfortable." Tanya looked around. No one seemed uncomfortable. In fact, most people were either focused on their own devices or watching Patricia with confused expressions. The family across the aisle, whose toddler was kicking the seat in front of him, hadn't received any warnings at all. "He's not creating a disturbance," Tanya said calmly. "It was just an accident." The plane was now accelerating down the runway, and Patricia was supposed to be seated for takeoff. Instead, she gripped the headrest of the seat in front of them. "I'll be watching your behavior for the rest of the flight," she said to Michael, who shrank back in his seat. "Any more disruptions will have consequences." As Patricia finally made her way back to her jump seat, the businessman across the aisle leaned over. "That was completely uncalled for," he said quietly to Tanya. "Your son didn't do anything wrong." Tanya nodded gratefully but felt a familiar weight in her chest. She'd experienced this kind of treatment before, people seeing her son as a problem before he'd done anything wrong. She had hoped to shield Michael from these experiences a little longer. Once they were in the air and the seatbelt sign turned off, the cabin settled into the routine of a short domestic flight. The drink service began, with flight attendants working their way down the aisle with the beverage cart. Michael, still subdued from the earlier interaction, watched as the children in the rows ahead played a hand-clapping game across the aisle. Their laughter carried through the cabin, but no one hushed them or gave them disapproving looks. "Mom," Michael whispered, "why is that lady mad at me? I've been good, right?" The question broke Tanya's heart. She pulled him close, kissing the top of his head. "You've been perfect, baby. Some people don't always see clearly." When the drink cart finally reached their row, it wasn't Patricia but another flight attendant who served them. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes who smiled at Michael. "What can I get for you, young man?" he asked. "Apple juice, please," Michael replied softly. "Coming right up," the flight attendant said, pouring the juice. "Here you go, Captain. Enjoy your flight." The small interaction brought the smile back to Michael's face, but it was short-lived. As the flight attendant moved on, Patricia returned, hovering near their row. "Is he bothering you?" she asked the woman seated in front of Michael, loud enough for them to hear. The woman turned, looking confused. "Who, the child?" "No, not at all. He's been perfectly quiet." Patricia pursed her lips, clearly disappointed by the answer. She moved away but kept glancing back at them every few minutes. The tension in the air was palpable, and passengers around them had begun to notice the strange behavior of the flight attendant. Little did anyone know that this was about to escalate into something much bigger than a misplaced tablet or a stern warning. About 30 minutes into the flight, Michael finished his apple juice and handed the empty cup to his mother. The flight seemed to be going smoothly despite the early attention. Michael had been extra careful, sitting perfectly still and speaking only in the quietest whispers when necessary. "Mom," he whispered, leaning close to Tanya's ear, "why is that flight attendant being so mean to me? Did I do something wrong?" Before Tanya could answer, Patricia appeared beside their row, as if she'd been waiting for any chance to approach them. Her sudden presence startled both Michael and Tanya. "Is there a problem here?" Patricia demanded, looking down at them with narrowed eyes. "No problem at all," Tanya replied calmly. "My son was just asking me a question." Patricia's lips thinned. "It sounded to me like he was talking back about me. Her voice was loud enough that passengers in nearby rows turned to watch the interaction. Tanya took a deep breath. She'd taught Michael that staying calm was important when faced with unfair treatment. Now she needed to follow her own advice. He wasn't talking back, she explained evenly. He was asking why he's being singled out when he's been very well behaved. The businessman across the aisle cleared his throat. The boy's been perfectly quiet, ma'am. Much quieter than most kids I've flown with. Patricia ignored him completely, focusing her attention on Michael. Young man, I'm going to need you and your mother to move to separate seats for safety reasons. Separate seats? Tanya's voice rose slightly in disbelief. He's 10 years old. I'm not separating from my child. A woman 2 rows ahead turned around. Why would they need to separate? That doesn't make any sense. Patricia's face flushed. This is an airline policy for disruptive passengers. But we're not being disruptive, Tanya said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. She glanced around the cabin, where the family with the toddler who had been kicking seats and crying intermittently hadn't received a single warning. The older kids playing their hand-clapping game were now watching a movie without headphones, the sound faintly audible. An older woman across the aisle spoke up. I've been flying this airline for 20 years, and I've never heard of such a policy. Patricia's jaw tightened. I'm the head flight attendant on this aircraft, and I determine what's disruptive. If you refuse to comply, I'll need to speak with the captain. Michael's eyes filled with tears. He wasn't used to being in trouble. At school, his teachers always praised his behavior and his thoughtful questions. Now, on what was supposed to be an exciting trip to see his grandmother, he was being treated like he'd done something terrible. Mom, he whispered, his voice trembling, I don't understand what's happening. Tanya put her arm around her son's shoulders. It's okay, baby. You haven't done anything wrong. The male flight attendant who had served them drinks earlier approached, looking concerned. Is everything all right here, Patricia? We're about to start the second beverage service. Patricia turned to her colleague. These passengers are being uncooperative and disruptive. I've asked them to separate for safety reasons, and they're refusing. The male flight attendant looked confused. Separate a mother and child? That's not our policy. More passengers were tuning in now. A woman in her 30s had taken out her phone and appeared to be recording the interaction. The businessman was on his feet, despite the seatbelt sign still being illuminated. This is completely inappropriate, he said firmly. This child has been exemplary, and you're harassing him and his mother for no reason. Patricia's face darkened. Sir, please return to your seat immediately. You're interfering with a flight attendant's duties. I'm documenting what appears to be discriminatory treatment, he replied, staying where he was. As a platinum member who flies weekly with this airline, I find this behavior unacceptable. Patricia reached for the cabin phone. I need to inform the captain of this situation immediately. As she marched to the front of the plane, whispers spread throughout the cabin. Several passengers were now openly filming with their phones. An elderly couple sitting behind Tanya reached forward and patted her shoulder supportively. Don't you worry, the elderly woman said. We all see what's happening here. It isn't right. Michael wiped his eyes, trying hard not to cry. He didn't want to give Patricia any more reasons to be angry with him. Mom, I'm scared, he admitted in a whisper. Are we in trouble? Tanya pulled him close, fighting back her own tears. No, baby. You have nothing to be afraid of. Sometimes people treat others unfairly, but we know who we are. We're going to be okay. But as Patricia returned with a grim expression and the captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing they would be making an unscheduled stop due to a situation in the cabin, Tanya wasn't so sure everything would be okay after all. The plane began its descent much earlier than scheduled. Through the window, Michael could see they were approaching a smaller airport than their Chicago destination. His heart raced as he clutched his mother's hand. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain's voice came over the intercom again. We're making a brief stop to address a situation on board. We apologize for any inconvenience and will have you on your way to Chicago as soon as possible. Patricia stood at the front of the cabin with a satisfied expression, occasionally glancing back at Michael and Tanya. The male flight attendant who had been kind to them earlier appeared troubled, whispering something to Patricia that she dismissed with a wave of her hand. It's going to be okay, Tanya whispered to Michael, though she wasn't entirely sure herself. She'd heard stories like this before, of black passengers being removed from flights for minor issues or no reason at all, but she never imagined it would happen to them, especially not to her 10-year-old son. As the plane touched down and taxied to a gate, 2 airport security officers and a man in a pilot's uniform who wasn't their captain boarded the plane. Patricia immediately approached them, speaking in hushed but animated tones while pointing toward Michael and Tanya. The businessman across the aisle stood up again. "I'm recording everything," he announced loudly, holding up his phone. "This child has done absolutely nothing wrong." Several other passengers also had their phones out now. A woman a few rows ahead called out, "This is discrimination. The boy has been perfectly behaved." The airport security officers looked uncomfortable as they made their way down the aisle, followed by the pilot and Patricia. When they reached Michael and Tanya's row, the pilot spoke first. "Ma'am, I understand there's been some disruptive behavior on this flight," he said, his tone professional but not unkind. Before Tanya could respond, the businessman interrupted. "That's completely false. I've been sitting across from them the entire flight. This young man has been exceptionally well behaved. It's the flight attendant who has been harassing them." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the cabin. The elderly couple behind them spoke up too. "We've been watching the whole thing," the elderly man said. "This flight attendant has been targeting this child from the moment they boarded. Meanwhile, there are children screaming and running in the aisles up front, and she hasn't said a word to them." The pilot glanced at Patricia, whose face had turned an angry red. He seemed to hesitate, looking around at the many passengers who were now openly protesting. Patricia leaned in to whisper something to him, and he nodded reluctantly. "I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to ask you and your son to deplane," he said to Tanya. "We can rebook you on the next available flight to Chicago." "This is outrageous," someone shouted from the back of the plane. "Why are they being removed?" a woman demanded. "Tell us exactly what rule they broke." Michael couldn't hold back his tears anymore. "Mom, what did I do wrong?" he asked, his voice breaking. "I tried to be good. I really tried." Tanya pulled him close. "You did nothing wrong, baby. Nothing at all." She looked up at the pilot. "We are not leaving this plane. My son has done nothing to warrant this treatment." One of the security officers shifted uncomfortably. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." "I want every passenger who believes this child did nothing wrong to raise their hand right now," the businessman called out. Nearly every hand in the visible cabin went up. Phone cameras continued to record. The pilot looked increasingly uncertain. Patricia stepped forward. "This is a security issue now. They need to be removed immediately." The second security officer leaned down toward Tanya. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I suggest you come with us now. I promise we'll sort this out at the gate. It might be better for your son than prolonging this scene." Tanya looked at Michael's tear-streaked face and made a quick decision. She wouldn't subject him to any more trauma on this plane. "We'll go," she said, standing up and gathering their belongings. "But I want everyone to know that this is wrong." As they moved into the aisle, a chorus of supportive comments followed them. "We're sending you our videos. This isn't right. We won't let this stand." Michael walked with his head down, humiliated despite having done nothing wrong. As they reached the front of the plane, the male flight attendant slipped a business card into Tanya's hand. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "Call that number. It's our customer advocacy line. I'll be filing a report myself." In the jet bridge, away from the eyes of the other passengers, Michael finally broke down completely. "Why did she hate me so much, Mom?" he sobbed. "I was being good. I promise I was being good." Tanya knelt down and hugged him tightly, her own tears falling now. "Some people have hate in their hearts, baby. But look how many people stood up for us. Look how many people saw the truth." As they were escorted through the unfamiliar airport, Tanya held her head high despite her breaking heart. She didn't know what would happen next, but she did know one thing for certain. This wasn't over. Tanya sat in the airport lounge with Michael beside her, still sniffling occasionally as he sipped the hot chocolate a kind airport employee had brought him. They had been rebooked on a flight to Chicago, leaving in 3 hours, and the airline's customer service representative had upgraded them to first class with profuse apologies. "Mom, look," Michael said, pointing to his mother's phone, which had been buzzing nonstop for the past 20 minutes. Tanya glanced down at the flood of notifications. There were text messages from friends, missed calls from family members, and dozens of social media alerts. Confused, she opened one of the messages from her sister. "OMG, Tanya. You and Michael are all over the internet. Are you okay? Call me now." With trembling fingers, Tanya opened her social media app and gasped. A video titled "Racist Flight Attendant Kicks 10-Year-Old Black Child Off Plane for No Reason" had already been viewed over 50,000 times in less than an hour. The businessman who had defended them had posted it along with a detailed account of what happened. "The most disgusting display of discrimination I've witnessed in my 30 years of business travel," his post read. "This young boy did nothing wrong. The flight attendant targeted him from the moment he boarded. I have contacted the airline executives directly and will not rest until justice is served." The video had been shared thousands of times already. Tanya scrolled through the comments, her eyes widening. "This is heartbreaking. That poor child. I'm canceling my flight with this airline tomorrow. Unacceptable. Look at that flight attendant's face, pure hatred for no reason. Someone find this boy and his mama. I want to start a GoFundMe for them." More videos were appearing by the minute as other passengers from the flight posted their recordings. One video, taken from the back of the plane, clearly showed Patricia ignoring the rowdy children at the front while zeroing in on Michael. Another captured the moment when nearly every passenger raised their hand to support Michael. A hashtag was trending. #Justice for Michael and Tanya. "Mom," Michael looked concerned. "Why are all those people sending you messages?" Tanya wasn't sure how to explain it to him. "The people on our plane saw something unfair happen, and they're telling others about it." Michael considered this. "Like when Ms. Wilson taught us about standing up against bullies." "Exactly like that, baby," Tanya said, pulling him close. Her phone rang, a number she didn't recognize. After a moment's hesitation, she answered. "Hello, is this Tanya Johnson?" a professional female voice asked. "Yes, it is." "Ms. Johnson, my name is Diane Lewis. I'm a reporter with Channel 7 News. We've seen the videos circulating online about what happened to you and your son today. Would you be willing to speak with us about your experience?" Tanya blinked in surprise. I'm not sure." "Mom." Michael tugged at her sleeve, pointing across the lounge. On the TV mounted on the wall, their story was already playing on the news. The caption read, "Child removed from flight. Racism or rule enforcement." The businessman who had defended them was being interviewed via video call. "It was blatant discrimination," he was saying. "I fly every week for business, and I've seen kids literally running down the aisles without comment from flight attendants. This young man was sitting quietly, following all rules, and was targeted exclusively because of the color of his skin." Tanya's phone buzzed with another call, this time from her mother in Chicago. "Tanya, are you and Michael okay? It's all over the news here." "We're fine, Mom," Tanya assured her, though her voice shook slightly. "We're on a later flight. We should still get there tonight." "That flight attendant should be fired," her mother declared. "The nerve of that woman, treating my grandson like that." By the time Tanya ended the call with her mother, 3 more reporters had left messages. Her social media followers had jumped from a few hundred to nearly 10,000 in the span of an hour. People she hadn't spoken to since high school were sending messages of support. The airline's customer advocacy team called next, asking if they could meet with her in person at the airport. "Our CEO would like to speak with you directly," the representative explained. Michael looked up at his mother, his eyes wide with confusion. "Are we famous now?" Tanya didn't know how to answer. This wasn't the kind of attention anyone would want, to be thrust into the spotlight because of discrimination. Yet there was something powerful happening too. People weren't staying silent. They were speaking up, demanding justice, refusing to look away. "What do you think Grandma will say when we tell her what happened?" Michael asked. "I don't think we'll need to tell her, baby," Tanya replied, showing him her phone where his grandmother had just sent a screenshot of their story on yet another news site. "I think she already knows." As they waited for their new flight, Tanya couldn't help but wonder what was happening with Patricia right now. Did she know that her actions had been captured from multiple angles? Did she realize that the world was watching? And most importantly, would there actually be consequences this time? What Tanya didn't know yet was that this was just the beginning. By the time their plane landed in Chicago, their story would be national news. And Patricia's day of reckoning was coming faster than anyone could have imagined. The sun had barely risen over Chicago when Tanya's phone began ringing. Michael was still asleep in his grandmother's guest room, exhausted from their eventful journey the previous day. Tanya checked the caller ID, another number she didn't recognize. "Hello," she answered quietly, stepping into the hallway to avoid waking Michael. "Ms. Johnson, this is Robert Wilson, Executive Vice President of Customer Experience at Skyway Airlines. I hope I'm not calling too early." Tanya glanced at the clock. 7:15 a.m. "I'm up," she said simply. "Ms. Johnson, first, I want to sincerely apologize for what you and your son experienced yesterday. I've reviewed the videos personally, and I'm calling to let you know that we've placed Patricia Henderson on administrative leave while we conduct a full investigation." Tanya leaned against the wall, taking in his words. "I appreciate that, but honestly, what is there to investigate? Dozens of passengers witnessed what happened. It's all on video." There was a slight pause before Robert continued. "You're right. The videos are damning, and we're taking this very seriously. Our CEO will be releasing a public statement within the hour. But I wanted you to hear directly from us first that this type of behavior is completely unacceptable and goes against everything our airline stands for." After ending the call, Tanya scrolled through her social media. The story had exploded overnight. The original video now had over 2 million views. News outlets from across the country had picked up the story. #Justice for Michael and Tanya was the #1 trending topic nationwide. In the kitchen, Michael's grandmother was watching the morning news while making pancakes, Michael's favorite. On the screen, a serious-looking anchor was speaking. "Breaking news this morning as Skyway Airlines faces intense backlash after videos showing a young black child being removed from a flight went viral yesterday. The airline has placed the flight attendant involved on administrative leave and promises a full investigation." The screen changed to show a reporter standing outside Skyway Airlines headquarters. "Sources within the airline tell us that this may not be the first complaint against flight attendant Patricia Henderson. We're hearing reports that several minority passengers have filed complaints about her behavior over the past few years, though none resulted in disciplinary action." Tanya nearly dropped her coffee. She hadn't known there were previous complaints. The story was getting bigger by the minute. Her phone buzzed with a text from the businessman who had defended them on the plane. "Tanya, I hope you and Michael are doing better today. I've been contacted by 3 other passengers who had similar experiences with the same flight attendant in the past 6 months. Would you be willing to speak with my attorney? I think we need to make sure this woman never works in customer service again." Before Tanya could respond, Michael padded into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes. His grandmother immediately enveloped him in a hug. "There's my brave boy," she said, kissing the top of his head. "Pancakes are almost ready." Michael climbed onto a chair and then noticed the TV. "Mom, that's us they're talking about." On screen, a photo of him and Tanya from her social media account appeared alongside footage from the plane. Tanya quickly changed the channel, not wanting Michael to relive yesterday's trauma. "Yes, baby. A lot of people are talking about what happened." "Is the mean lady in trouble?" he asked innocently. Tanya exchanged a look with her mother. "It looks that way, yes." Around midday, another call came in, this time from a woman named Lisa Taylor, who introduced herself as Skyway Airlines Head of Internal Investigations. "Ms. Johnson, I'm calling as part of our formal investigation. We've been reviewing Ms. Henderson's employment history, and we've uncovered a pattern that concerns us greatly. There have been 7 formal complaints about her treatment of minority passengers in the past 3 years, but they were handled at the local level and never escalated to corporate." Tanya felt a mix of vindication and anger. "So you're telling me this has happened before, multiple times, and nothing was done?" "Unfortunately, yes. And that's part of our investigation too. Why these complaints weren't properly addressed. We're implementing immediate changes to our reporting system. But I wanted to ask if you would be willing to provide a formal statement for our investigation." By evening, the story had taken another turn. A former Skyway employee had come forward, claiming that Patricia's biased behavior was well known among staff, but overlooked because she was close friends with a former regional manager. Outside Patricia's suburban home, news vans had gathered. Her reporter managed to catch her briefly as she tried to get to her car. "Ms. Henderson, what do you have to say about the videos showing your treatment of a 10-year-old boy on yesterday's flight?" Patricia shielded her face and hurried into her vehicle without comment. As Michael and his grandmother baked cookies in the kitchen, trying to salvage what was supposed to be a joyful visit, Tanya's phone buzzed with yet another notification. The Skyway Airlines CEO had just released a video statement. "Based on our preliminary investigation, I want to assure the public that we are taking swift and appropriate action. What happened yesterday does not reflect our values as a company, and we are committed to ensuring it never happens again." Tanya showed the video to her mother, who nodded approvingly. "Good," she said simply. "But this isn't over yet." And she was right. As day turned to evening, no one could have predicted just how quickly Patricia's world would come crashing down by the following morning. The morning news was playing in Grandma's living room as Michael helped her water the plants. Tanya walked in with her phone in hand, looking stunned. "You okay, honey?" Grandma asked, noticing her daughter's expression. Tanya held up her phone. "The CEO of Skyway Airlines just called me personally. Patricia has been fired, effective immediately." Grandma nodded with satisfaction. "Good. Actions have consequences." Michael looked up from the plant he was watering. "Does that mean she won't be mean to any more kids?" "That's right, baby," Tanya said, sitting down beside him. "She won't be working on planes anymore." The news anchor on TV was already reporting the story. "Breaking news this morning. Skyway Airlines has terminated flight attendant Patricia Henderson following the viral incident involving a 10-year-old passenger earlier this week." The airline released a statement saying they have zero tolerance for discriminatory behavior and are implementing new company-wide training effective immediately. The screen showed Patricia attempting to shield her face from cameras as she hurried into her house. The reporter continued, "Henderson has declined to comment, but sources close to the airline tell us that the investigation uncovered multiple previous incidents that had gone unaddressed." Michael frowned at the screen. "She looks sad now." Tanya pulled in close. "Sometimes people need to face consequences to learn and grow. What she did was wrong, and now she knows there's a price for treating people unfairly." By lunchtime, Tanya's phone was ringing again. This time it was the businessman from the plane. "Have you seen the news?" he asked excitedly. "Not just about Patricia being fired. The airline is completely overhauling their complaint system and bias training." "I just heard," Tanya replied. "It's hard to believe all of this happened because of one flight." "It wasn't just one flight," he said. "It was the last straw in a pattern of behavior that had been ignored for too long. And it was because you and your son had the courage to stand your ground and because so many people refused to stay silent." After hanging up, Tanya checked her email to find a surprising message from Skyway Airlines' marketing department. They wanted Michael and Tanya to be part of their new anti-bias advertising campaign. The email mentioned a significant payment for their participation plus lifetime flight benefits. Grandma whistled when Tanya showed her the offer. "Now that's what I call making things right." Later that afternoon, Michael was playing in the backyard when the doorbell rang. Tanya opened it to find a delivery person with a large package. "Delivery for Michael Johnson," he said, handing Tanya a box with the Skyway Airlines logo. Inside was a captain's hat, a model airplane, and a letter personally signed by the airline's CEO inviting Michael to tour their headquarters and sit in the cockpit of a real plane. "We want to replace your negative experience with a positive one," the letter read. Michael's eyes lit up as he tried on the captain's hat. "Mom, can we go?" "Please." "We'll see, baby," Tanya said, smiling at his excitement. "We'll see." That evening, as Michael helped his grandmother make dinner, Tanya received another unexpected call from the male flight attendant who had been kind to them on the flight. "I just wanted you to know," he said, "that your story has changed things here. They're listening to us now. There's a company-wide meeting tomorrow to introduce new policies. Patricia had been reported by crew members before, but nothing was ever done. Now they're promising that will never happen again." That night, as Tanya tucked Michael into bed in his grandmother's guest room, he asked a question that caught her off guard. "Mom, do you think that lady will ever say sorry?" Tanya sat on the edge of his bed, thinking about how to answer. "I don't know, baby. Some people find it very hard to admit when they're wrong." "Ms. Wilson says everybody makes mistakes, but saying sorry is how we start to fix them," Michael said thoughtfully. "Your teacher is very wise," Tanya replied, kissing his forehead. The next morning brought another surprise. The story had reached national morning shows, and a popular TV host was discussing it on her segment about everyday heroes. "What struck me most about this story," the host was saying, "wasn't just the injustice that occurred, but how so many strangers came together to stand up for what's right. That little boy and his mother showed incredible dignity throughout this ordeal, and they've sparked a conversation that's long overdue." By the end of the week, Skyway Airlines announced a complete overhaul of their training programs and the creation of a new passenger advocacy office. 3 other major airlines quickly followed suit, reviewing their own policies and procedures. On their flight home, Tanya and Michael were treated like royalty. The captain came out personally to greet Michael and gave him a tour of the cockpit before takeoff. The flight attendants couldn't have been kinder or more attentive. As their plane soared through the clouds, Michael gazed out the window, his earlier fear of flying now replaced with wonder. "Mom," he said, turning to Tanya with wisdom beyond his years, "I think we helped make flying better for a lot of people, didn't we?" Tanya squeezed his hand, tears welling in her eyes as she thought about the chain of events their experience had set in motion. "Yes, baby," she said. "I think we did."